Hi, everyone. We'll just get started in a couple of minutes. Just let some more people join. Well, let's just get started. I know that we don't have very much time today, so good morning, good evening, and good afternoon from wherever you're joining, and welcome to another great webinar in the Climate Tracking and Transparency webinar series. World Resources Institute's Tracking and Strengthening Climate Action, which is TASCA, initiative together with the Partnership on Transparency in the Paris Agreement, are pleased to host this series as we explore critical topics to support domestic transparency systems. These webinars feature presentations and interactive discussion among experts, practitioners, and national government representatives. Moving forward, a couple logistical things before we start off. During this webinar, attendees will remain in listen-only mode, and participants may raise comments or questions throughout the webinar by typing them into the questions box, which you will find at the bottom of your Zoom webinar screen. We'll try to get to them at the end of the presentation so it doesn't interrupt the flow. If you're having any trouble with audio or video, please do send an email to Beth. Her email address is at the bottom of the screen, and please do limit your use of the questions function to topical questions for the panelists. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available online. Just a little bit about the TASCA project. It's being managed by WRI, and it's really to help governments transparently communicate progress towards the NDCs, meet international accounting and reporting requirements, look at accounting for commitments, and this is across both mitigation and adaptation, and looking at additional sort of abatement opportunities to support national dialogue for NDC enhancement. There are about 5 countries that we work on, but this is also being expanded. So. And then without much further ado, I'm just going to move on to introducing today's panelists. I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Nisha Krishnan, and I'm a climate finance associate at the climate resilience practice at WRI. I predominantly focus on adaptation finance accountability, as well as mainstreaming climate risks into financial and sort of processes. But the main star of today's show is Barry Smith, who's a researcher at IIED, and his work focuses on adaptation finance and monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So moving on to today's presentation, the webinar examines sort of monitoring and evaluation approaches for major global results management frameworks and national frameworks to draw lessons for aligning country systems with these fund level results frameworks to measure adaptation success. Aligning global results management frameworks and national monitoring and evaluation systems offers multiple benefits. And despite considerable international attention for adaptation M&E, there's limited evidence that these M&E systems are linking across these levels. They miss out on the efficiencies of using these existing frameworks, and an overemphasis on upward reporting to funders also risks neglecting the downward accountability and adds layers to complicated M&E requirements. So global RMFs that are better integrated with national systems can actually help countries develop and entrench their own national climate change M&E systems. It generates country buy-in and integrates climate change M&E across government ministries so that they can accurately report against their own priorities. Without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to Barry, who will introduce the rest of the webinar, and look forward to answering your questions later on.
Thanks, Nisha. Can we just move on to the next slide, please? So this is an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm first going to offer some exposition on why harmonizing global results measurement frameworks, which I'm going to refer to as RMFs, is desirable, and then also what some of the barriers are. After that, I'm going to give an overview of the RMF approach that's taken by a selection of the climate funds. I'm then going to zero in on a couple of country case studies just to see how some are beginning to overcome the problems that are experienced in adaptation M&E. And then the final part of the webinar, I'm going to be looking at how global RMFs can link up with country-led M&E systems and offer two broad routes on how this can take place. So, next slide. Before digging deeper into the approaches that are taken by national and global RMFs, we may first understand what the need is to streamline or align M&E. Aligning country-led and global M&E systems can be mutually beneficial. As you can see here on the slide, I've identified three key benefits that I'll now discuss. 1. More efficient M&E and reporting. Harmonised donor and government M&E systems maximise the collective efficacy of the finance which is flowing into developing countries. Aligning global RMFs with systems that are already in place can provide a logical entry point for adaptation M&E, gathering data from existing systems instead of starting from scratch. This can create financial and human resource efficiencies for national governments, leaving money to invest in other priorities, such as longer-term capability buildings. It also ensures that a more rapid operationalisation of M&E as countries invest less time and effort in establishing new systems to ensure compliance with global RMFs. Having parallel donor and national M&E systems can hinder the development of in-country institutions and arrest the development of in-country M&E capacity. A lack of harmonisation between donor and national M&E framework overburdens government ministries with multiple data collection and reporting requirements. Linking climate adaptation with existing systems and taking account of national capacities leads to more efficient results management, less resource wastage, and ultimately nurtures countries' longer-term ability to monitor the progress of their climate commitments. 2. Sustainability of M&E systems. Developing countries' M&E efforts are often funded through technical assistance and support, but can become unsustainable once funding cycles are complete. If donors harness existing national M&E systems by drawing on indicators from country-led frameworks, using well-entrenched and operational institutions, processes, and existing data sources, they can help make M&E more sustainable. Investing in national systems rather than project-specific M&E and seeking to nurture data collection tools and develop joint metrics can nurture national M&E systems to build longer-term capabilities and systems. This will eventually allow for the use of existing databases to assess adaptation progress across a range of reporting requirements. 3. Country ownership helps ensure buy-in. The extent to which development partners use country-led results frameworks when designing new interventions is a fundamental aspect of country ownership. The same is true of countries' own results frameworks and M&E systems to track progress on results, as this minimises the use of other frameworks. Using results information helps national governments improve policies and budgets and enhances downwards and upwards accountability. Using this information effectively would enable countries to see a clear buy-in of M&E and the results. 4. Bottom-up robustness. Aligning global to national could encourage vertical integration with subnational levels. Linking systems on a national and subnational level would generate and exchange information between national and subnational institutions, allowing for high resolution in M&E. National systems could feed data upwards to the global level, where new adaptation indicators could be developed at aggregated levels. And 5. Contextual results. Aligning global and national frameworks can allow for flexible indicators that can be contextualized to country-specific reporting needs. National systems, which are better suited to national circumstances, can help global systems address contextualization challenges. Global RMFs that have the flexibility to be aligned and better integrated with national systems can help countries develop their national climate change M&E systems and support the development of national frameworks by integrating M&E across different government ministries. Next slide. But it's also important to acknowledge that there are barriers that can explain why alignment could be tricky and that will likely encourage funders to focus on their own RMFs. 1. Absence of robust country-led M&E systems and capacities. Many countries have developed strategies, goals, targets and plans for climate and development, but not all have invested in operationalising the M&E systems illustrated in their plans, and many do not prioritise setting up such systems. 2. Greater emphasis on upward reporting and short-term outputs. Because climate funds have to demonstrate upward accountability to their donors, project implementers tend to develop project-specific indicator frameworks that focus on demonstrating on how well donor money is spent, short-term outputs, rather than longer-term benefits that the country and its people will experience as a result of the climate investment. National level outcome indicators cannot always provide a comprehensive picture of results achieved throughout a project cycle, especially in the early stages. 3. Disconnect between national climate change priorities and donor-funded projects. Project implementers may see greater incentive in aligning their priorities with funders' strategic priorities rather than those of the countries where the investments are being made. In the absence of connections between fund-level projects and country-level climate change priorities, it can be difficult to use national targets and M&E systems for measuring fund-level results. 4. Lack of quality of national-level data. In the absence of sophisticated data collection methods and systems within the countries, it might be difficult for climate funds to justify using national data systems. There is an associated risk that reliance on weaker and emerging national M&E systems cannot yield the quality of data required to effectively track the impact of their interventions. Development partners may also require reporting on specific indicators that are not part of the national framework. Next slide. So in this section, I'm going to go through the approach adopted by 4 funds. The first up is PPCR. The PPCR results framework is a monitoring and reporting framework based on 4 principles: country ownership, stakeholder engagement, using quantitative and qualitative methods, and ensuring learning by doing. The framework features 11 indicators, 5 of which are core indicators. A logical framework underpins the results areas and indicators, setting out the chain of results from inputs and activities through to project outputs, program outcome, and national and international impacts. The PPCR M&R system was one of the first of its type for assessing adaptation finance at an aggregated level. Fostering a programmatic approach to climate action planning, PPCR uses its M&R system to assess adaptation progress and ensure learning and accountability. There are 2 streams of reporting and data collection at country and MDB level. Each country's PPCR focal point provides country-level information collected through stakeholder dialogues and scoring workshops, which are held on an annual basis. So let's look at some of the positive elements. PPCR technical assistance allows for countries to develop M&E systems or integrate the PPC RMF into their existing systems. Technical assistance is offered to guide the MDBs and partner countries to develop their own results frameworks and include M&R capacity support as part of the country programming process. This ensures that countries integrate PPCR relevant indicators into their national frameworks. The system is designed to operate within existing systems and avoid parallel structures. In-country support is available for countries with less advanced monitoring capacities for implementing M&R practices. The PPCR M&R framework uses a more learning-based approach, placing emphasis on institutionalizing M&E within country systems. As well as seeking results, M&R systems focus on nurturing monitoring mechanisms through stakeholder capacity building and learning. For example, the Nepal Climate Change Programme's RMF uses the 5 PPCR core indicators to track progress on PPCR and non-PPCR national adaptation projects at programme level. Samoa has also integrated the core indicators into its national plan framework for development. Unlike other funds, PPCR has historically placed some emphasis on building capacity for M&R, as well as laterally through its capacity building and training initiative. These include trainings, stakeholder workshops, scoring workshops, and measures that support the implementation of the M&R system. Many PPCR countries are aligning with MDB's results frameworks to leverage the data MDBs are reporting, but some countries are also leveraging national data sources for PPCR, such as Niger and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So looking at some of the gaps now. Although PPCR is an exemplar case in introducing financial assistance and measures to help countries implement the PPCR M&R system, it does not assure sustainability of the system beyond the funding. Countries must specifically seek financial assistance to establish an M&R system or integrate the PPCR system into their existing M&E practices. Some PPCR countries, such as Mozambique, Samoa, and Nepal, have done this, asking for additional funding for technical assistance to nurture their systems. Those that do not ask for technical assistance only get support for implementing the results framework, which may not be sustainable. PPCR aims to build national systems and align with country-led results frameworks, but in some countries, the department that hosts PPCR projects differs from the departments responsible for managing climate change M&E. In such situations, the PPCR might encourage parallel RMF systems that are not aligned with each other. PPCR core indicators include parameters that provide quantitative figures for numbers of people supported and numbers of tools used as a result of PPCR investments. Although the PPCR considers them outcome indicators, most of these are output orientated, not outcome focused. While they are useful for providing a comprehensive picture of results achieved, they do not give much information on the number of beneficiaries with improved resilience or reduced vulnerability. PPCR does not have any resilience type indicators that represent outcome involving improvements in people's or systems' ability to manage and accommodate climate change hazards. Next slide. Moving on, let's have a look at the GCF. The GCF's RMF aims to enable effective M&E of the outputs, outcomes and impacts of its investments and portfolio, as well as its organisational and operational effectiveness. There are 43 indicators, 17 of which measure adaptation. All are based on the logic model, reflecting how GCF activities contribute to project or programme level outcomes that lead to fund level impact, and finally, a paradigm shift in that area. Results are associated with indicators that are specified in the fund's performance management framework, the PMF. So the GCF's results framework is still in its infancy, but we can draw some positives from its design and its future applicability. GCF entities can report on a flexible range of indicators that correspond to fund's results areas. Project implementers are expected to report against a maximum of 10 indicators. With no prescribed output indicators, stakeholders can choose the output indicators they report against on a project basis. In the longer term, the success of adaptation will be measured in terms of the extent to which it helps secure development goals and maintain and improve human and ecological well-being in the face of climate change. The GCF's RMF includes indicators that track aspects of human and ecological well-being, such as number of people killed or affected by climate hazards, economic losses from climate hazards, and the number of people with adequate food security and access to reliable and safe water. GCF regularly updates the framework using a trial and error approach. In its current form, it is drawn from a wide range of other mature climate funds results frameworks, giving an opportunity to learn from and avoid past mistakes. Under the GCF's Readiness and Preparatory Support Programme, countries are eligible to request support via their NDA, their National Designated Authority, for establishing a framework or system to measure adaptation planning and effectiveness and develop metrics, indicators and methods for monitoring the adaptation planning process and/or adaptation outcomes defined. So let's have a look at some of the gaps in the GCF approach. One of the main positive findings of the GCF's independent review was that the RMF helps countries focus their project proposal on GCF results. Conversely, we can view this as a negative, as GCF results areas are based on the fund's strategic impact areas and not those of the countries, not the country priorities in which their national climate change strategies and their NDCs. Project proponents must make clear in their proposal how a project aligns with country priorities, but the pre-formulated indicators under which the adaptation PMF on increased resilience focuses on specific areas such as health, infrastructure, ecosystem-based services, water and food security, which may skew the prioritization of projects towards GCF objectives rather than the country objectives. Ideally, countries should be allowed to define their own measures of improved resilience according to the goals they've set in their national strategies and the projects they have prioritized in their specific contexts. GCF has taken a less programmatic approach to results measurement than the PPCR. Different entities report on different projects through separate RMFs rather than together as a country. The role of the GCF's central coordinating body between the fund and the country, the NDA or the focal point, is limited beyond granting a no objection letter. Although NDAs are mandated to ensure that countries own and use the results of the GCF investments, this is not evident, primarily because accredited entities are responsible for project or programme level results management, and there's no coherent country level reporting of GCF outcomes. At country level, the initial monitoring and accountability framework for accredited entities encourage NDAs to organise participatory reviews, but there's little in terms of substantive guidance, and the extent to which that is happening is unclear. Furthermore, there's no practical direction on how to bring together the M&E processes at different results level to assess the impacts at a higher level. The GCF's results reporting systems do not align with national M&E systems or the indicator frameworks designed to assess the outcomes of national climate change strategies. To increase the usability of indicators, country governments could also use some of the fund level indicators to assess national adaptation performance, ensuring more buy-in for collecting of information. Next slide. So looking at the GEF, this is the approach for the least developed country fund. The GEF adopted the OECD's definition of results-based management, RBM, as a management strategy focusing on performance and achievement of outputs, outcomes, and impacts. The purpose of the RBM is to improve management effectiveness and accountability by defining realistic expected results, monitoring progress towards the achievement of expected results, integrating lessons into management decisions, and reporting on performance. As one of the oldest funds, GEF's approach has evolved over time, and there is now a simpler framework with fewer indicators. It reduced from 52 to 14, 7 of which request gender disaggregated data. The GEF created the LDCF to implement the national adaptation programs of actions in the LDCs. In each national program has M&E integrated within it. So the noteworthy elements are, similar to the PPCR, the GEF framework has evolved into a more programmatic portfolio level M&R framework with clear, consistent definitions of methodologies, concepts. It is simple, but it's not too simple. Although it has 14 indicators, it has been simplified over the years. Like PPCR, it no longer includes pre-formulated prescriptive outputs. It is consistent with the PPCR, the GCF RMFs, and the UNFCCC requirements to allow uniformity and avoid subjecting countries to onerous new indicators. The GEF RBM revisions have introduced qualitative tools and methodologies that go beyond quantitative outputs. The revised tracking tool introduces 4 qualitative scoring methodologies that are consistent both with PPCR as well as the Tracking Adaptation and Measuring Development Framework, or the TAMD framework. Some gaps still, however, exist. For example, although it clearly mentions outcomes, very few of the GEF indicators help track long-term impacts. There are a wide range of indicators for measuring outcomes, but the extent to which some of them capture results at outcome and impact levels is arguable. Like most other funds, the GEF's RMF mentions learning, but this is mainly in the form of statements of intent to undertake knowledge management, production, and sharing. There's little detail on how learning will actually be promoted and pursued. So, although the GEF's RBM has been instrumental in supporting reporting, accountability, and communications, its role in evidence-based decision-making and learning has been limited. Next slide. The UK's ICF KPIs are designed to report results achieved from the ICF spend by tracking progress towards expected outcomes and overall performance. The KPIs are a comprehensive set of indicators designed to monitor the impacts of diverse climate change programs and to help develop an evidence base for climate finance policy and program decision making. They monitor results of both output, for example KPI 1, people supported to adapt to effects of climate change, and outcome levels, for example KPI 4, people whose resilience has been improved. The KPIs disaggregate the data along 4 axes: sex, disability, geography, and age, and have informed the knowledge and result management systems of the CIFs, the GEF, the GCF, and the MDBs. So looking at the positive elements first, with the focus on KPI 4, the number of people whose resilience has improved as a result of ICF is the most relevant indicator for measuring resilience. It explicitly advocates identifying context-specific indicators based on factors that influence resilience with the beneficiaries. Project staff and beneficiaries agree the number of indicators to use and the nature of changes needed to show that resilience has improved according to their particular context. Defining improved resilience in reference to contextual indicators can be a challenge, but they're well elaborated methodologies and guidance to help project implementers develop them. Once countries define and prove resilience themselves, they can use context-specific proxies of vulnerability or resilience that are already measuring within their national systems instead of pre-formulated indicators. ICF guidance provides for using climate data, measuring project impacts, and linking outcome-level resilience indicators with impact-level well-being indicators. Analysing climate data alongside context-specific resilience indicators allows us to measure development performance against a backdrop of climate change, which we can interpret as a measurement of adaptation success. Measuring the number of resilient individuals makes the indicator more measurable and comparable across a large portfolio of programs. It is easier to draw proxies of individual level resilience indicators from national databases than household or community level resilience indicators. They're also easier to disaggregate by gender and age. In terms of identified gaps, the principle behind KPI is relatively simple, but defining improved resilience through contextual indicators can be challenging, and the participatory approach to reporting can be resource intensive. But using the 3 A's resilience model, the capacity to adapt to, anticipate, and absorb climate extremes and disasters, as suggested in the recent guidance, can help around these issues. Next slide. So I'm now going to talk about some different examples of country-led M&E systems that we've researched. Many countries have developed M&E systems for climate change adaptation to gather robust information on the effectiveness of adaptation interventions and policies. Country-led M&E frameworks are results frameworks developed by the countries to measure their own national targets and goals rather than ones developed by global partners. They include frameworks for climate change and adaptation, development M&E systems that integrate climate indicators within them, and frameworks that link sector and subnational to the national systems. Different countries have taken different approaches, reflecting not only the diversity in context, but also the fact that a one-size-fits-all approach is not practically possible, or indeed desirable. While national level adaptation M&E is relatively nascent, it is evolving quickly, revealing new opportunities and challenges. By building on country-led systems, development partners can ensure that their actions and intentions align with country priorities and help build country capacities to monitor and evaluate. So I'm not going to go through all the countries here which are on the slide, but rather I'm going to grab a couple of countries to draw attention to examples and characteristics of the operational elements to demonstrate why alignment is desirable. So I'm going to discuss Kenya and Colombia, and if we've got time, I'll also discuss Philippines. But all of these countries are covered in the report that IIED published earlier this year. So I'm going to link that at the end, and you can find that on the IIED website. So, next slide, sorry. So the first up is I'm going to talk about Kenya. Kenya's Climate Change Action Plan describes the National Performance and Benefit Measurement Framework. This is an integrated framework for measuring, monitoring, evaluating, verifying, and reporting results of mitigation actions, adaptations, actions, and the synergies between them, which gets over the challenge of having to surmount multi-framework reporting. Rather than addressing different layers of M&E, the system can be used to speak to different frameworks. So the framework conjoins measurement, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions and mitigation activities and adaptation M&E using the tracking, adaptation, measure and development approach. Hence it's called an MRV plus system. Next slide. One of the key features in Kenya's MRV plus system is around these synergies. In developing MRV plus, a screening exercise was taken to explore potential synergies and trade-offs across multiple sectors. Criteria for mitigation, adaptation, and development were applied in a screening process, and synergy indicators were included in order to measure and evaluate both positive and negative impacts and help ensure a suitable response that could then be taken to maximize positive impacts whilst minimizing undesirable impacts. Each proposed climate action is scored against these criteria for positive and negative impacts. This provides a view of potential synergies and trade-offs for each action. There are a number of additional features. Sorry, go back. Thanks. There are a number of additional features of the MRV Plus system that merit further investigation. For example, subnational to national aggregation and the ability to observe changes in institutional capacity also feature. A number of outcome-based indicators were identified at the country level to measure the effectiveness of national initiatives to build institutional adaptive capacity at the subnational level. Based on these country-level indicators, a number of national-level outcome-based indicators were identified. These indicators are measured, they measure the effectiveness of local and country initiatives to reduce vulnerability at the national level. Data coordination is another challenge that's been addressed under the MRV Plus system. Data supply and reporting obligation agreements, or DSROAs, are to be issued to all the organisations that need to supply data or information into the system. These agreements require that all organisations are to use a master list of all data needed for the MRV Plus system, and that all data is to be housed in the centralised climate change relevant data repository. The rationale is that having a central cache of required information will lead to less fragmented approach and more accurate evaluation of datasets. Next slide. So I'm going to skip some of the background. This is the Colombian system is called Synergia. And Synergia's mission is twofold. One is to assist policymakers to make evidence-informed decisions, and two, to strengthen the culture of M&E in Colombia and Latin America more widely. The M&E results-oriented system has successfully integrated performance measurement as a current practice within all government planning frameworks, and the results are then in turn utilised for both accountability and for decision-making within the government. So there's two distinct components to the system. One is an online system of performance indicators. There's around 500, which track progress against the President's goals and is complemented by an agenda of impact evaluations of government programmes and interventions overseen by the government, but largely undertaken by external organisations. So the online system features indicators for input, process, output, and outcome measures. The information that is gathered is widely and readily available, including reports of non-achievement against the President's goals, which helps improve accountability and is disaggregated by region, including for the major cities, so subnational performance can be measured. It also includes baseline data, annual targets, as well as actual performance against the targets. Excuse me. The impact evaluations entail statistical analysis of program beneficiaries with control or comparison groups. They often focus on operational efficiency and other management issues. The evaluations are outsourced to consultants, specialist organisations, and to academia through a competitive bidding process. Supplementary to the two elements, there's formal channels established to share and disseminate information and results, including annual reports to Congress by the President, which is widely shared by the media, quarterly reports, and regular town hall meetings. Synergia sits within the National Department of Planning, which is managed by the DEPP. This is the main institution for M&E. The National Department of Planning is responsible for annual reporting to the National Council of Economic and Social Policy, a high-level policy committee that is held by the President. So the DEPP provides guidance on methodologies and types of evaluation and delivers technical support for a number of evaluations that are undertaken by sector ministries and other agencies, and works within subnational governments to help them with their M&E activities. There's considerable evidence that the evaluations of government initiatives and policies have influenced government decision-making, and there are instances of programs being scaled up based on information gathered from the evaluation. There's been a number of challenges, however, as there are reportedly high staff attrition rate amongst the evaluation team, but to overcome this and help safeguard knowledge management, processes are documented in detail for new personnel. Another issue is that many staff members within the unit are taken on as consultants rather than permanent staff, and therefore more likely to leave. There's no regular or formalised data auditing, and consequently the reliability of the data is unknown, and there have been concerns around the legitimacy of imputed data. There is, however, a team that checks the data quality and can flag any issues that are identified. The cost of many evaluations is high, which may also limit the number of evaluations that are undertaken. And there's also been concerns expressed around the disconnect between Synergia's two components, as indicator data has not been used to identify underperforming or problem government programs, will then trigger an evaluation. Next slide. I think we'll actually, I think given time, if you could skip on to, I'll tell you when to stop. You don't mind? Keep it going. Next one. That one. Okay, we'll stop here. So just in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on this now. So drawing from our analysis, we identified two broad routes for linking up. One, global RMS can align with strong country systems, or two, global funds can nurture less sophisticated country level M&E systems. So I'm going to go into each of them in a bit more detail, talk through how and why this approach is beneficial. Next slide. So, several countries have invested in national climate change strategies and ways to assess adaptation progress. Climate funds can align with emerging systems in these early stages, funding interventions and draw their objectives from country-level results frameworks, plans and strategies, and making use of indicators from existing country frameworks and data sources, while providing clear mandates to country focal points for programmatic reporting. Under this route, our review considered two different options. The first is improving international climate fund design to harmonise the country-led results frameworks. Aligning proposals with country priorities can allow countries to assess adaptation progress against their own specific goals. Climate funds design should include proposal development guidelines and criteria for assessing proposals based on alignment and country and sector priorities, adaptation goals and targets as outlined in national climate change strategies, NAPs and the NDCs. Aligning and integrating global RMFs with national systems can help countries develop and entrench national climate change M&E systems. With the right support, country government focal points could play a greater role in ensuring countries own and use the results of climate fund investments. Funds can outline monitoring roles for country focal points and provide guidance and capacity building to help them coordinate M&E processes at the different levels to assess the impact of the investments. This will increase alignment with country policies and results by ensuring more ownership and use of results. Many RMS focus on upward reporting, how money is spent or how projects are delivered. Building an ethos of using results for downward accountability and better decision making into fund design and principles would ensure funds measure the long-term benefits of an investment and stop developing project-specific, detached indicator frameworks. We recommend that funds complement portfolio results assessed by country governments with project-level reporting. Implementing entities or project management units can use project level as well as high level core indicators. Fund level results can also be assessed with existing M&E systems. National examples show that countries are developing capacities and a range of generic indicators to measure resilience, vulnerability, and adaptive capacity based on climate risk they experience and the climate relevant national development indicators. Global RMF indicators can and should draw from these contextual indicators and country capacities. For example, the UK's ICF KPI4 offers a useful approach for measuring resilience, which other RMFs could adopt. Governments and climate funds should synergize data infrastructure and monitoring systems and link up M&E systems. Several countries, including Cambodia, Kenya, and Mozambique, are building on national systems to develop local well-being or resilience indicators. Others, such as Morocco, are choosing existing indicators from their national and regional information systems to increase coherence between national and subnational data processes. Next slide. So not all country systems have well-designed M&E systems with which to align, and several barriers to alignment still remain. Some have invested in developing M&E frameworks, but lack the sustained resources or capacity to operationalize them. Consequently, we've developed a second route, which is represented on the right of this diagram. Investing in national M&E systems, nurturing their data collection tools, and developing joint metrics, funds could help countries build databases that can assess adaptation progress across a range of reporting requirements. Harnessing existing national M&E systems by drawing on indicators from country-led frameworks and using well-entrenched and operational institutions and processes, as well as existing data sources, can help make M&E sustainable. For example, the climate investment funds are designed to support countries to develop their national systems. There must be a concerted global effort to ensure that countries have the technical capacity they need to identify and implement adaptation actions and track their performance. The PPCR has considerably invested in country capacity for M&E, and several bilateral donors are helping develop M&E capacity at national level. Funds can deploy readiness support to help scale up capacity development efforts. Investing in integrated adaptation and development M&E systems will allow countries to assess the benefits of adaptation and sustain M&E for climate within nationally funded development M&E. Climate funds can play a key role in institutionalizing M&E and funding capacity development within national systems by investing in long-term capabilities and systems. Linking up climate results with national budgeting processes, medium-term financing and expenditure frameworks and national development planning process can also ensure sustainability of M&E beyond short-term funding. So I think that is the final slide, and I think that is me. So happy to take any questions. Thank you. Also, thank you to the guys helping me out here. Thanks to Nisha and Cynthia and Beth.
Thanks, Barry. That was a very sort of comprehensive view of the wide variety of approaches in aligning M&E systems. I think that Rebecca, if you just go to the previous slide, there's also several more case studies that that Barry and his colleagues have researched, and I would highly encourage you to look through the different sort of cases out there, the different M&E systems. And I think as we have more and more experience with adaptation, with national sort of actions and plans of action taking on this issue of M&E, we really need to think about critically about what we're learning from our experiences and how countries can actually build the capacity to track and monitor and actually evaluate and learn from the adaptation actions we have on the ground. With that, I will open it up to questions. If there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, if you'd like to type in any questions, we'd be happy to answer. I think we'll start off with one that actually came via email, and I'll read it out. This is from the lead M&E advisor for for Cambodia, and his question is on what are the process and outcome indicators to monitor, evaluate, and learn from aligning national M&E systems with PPCR frameworks, for example. Barry, if you want to take that first.
Hi. So I don't actually have them I don't actually have them to hand, but they are readily available online, and there's been an evaluation of the PPCR M&E as well, and there's a number of evaluations of the SIFs which were undertaken last year, which I'd encourage you to have a look at. So I think the best thing is probably just to go online and grab them.
Great. Thanks, Barry. Are there others who might have questions? Or are there any interesting points that you've found from your own experiences that you'd like to share? Happy to let others come in as well if you would like to put up your hand, I think. I believe that functionality is also down at the bottom. None. Sounds like it's a very conclusive sort of seminar. I think Barry just sent around the toolkit. Sorry, from Sunita. How do you ensure that all these M&R are tracked for its participatory content?
Okay, so that's excuse me. Yep. So there's so for some of the RMFs, there is relatively comprehensive guidelines that have been produced, for example, for the UK, PPCR, and they do have guidance on how the on participation, and particularly in the PPCR, the way in which the information is gathered on an annual basis through scoring workshops, and that's very consultative. So I think it's just a case of a case-by-case basis. I don't think there is there's a way in tracking that across all the RMFs and across all the global funds. I think it's on a case-by-case basis, and it's largely contingent on what the guidance is, and then what the particular, for example, the GCF, it'll depend on the accredited entity that they're working with. So it's really, there isn't an actual, we don't really look at that so much. I think it is contingent on the guidance and that's been developed for each of the funds. I've also, just in answer to the previous question as well, I've linked the CIF's PPCR M&R toolkit as well in the chat box. Have we looked at linking them with SDG indicators? So actually, so the report that we're looking at, so in order to undertake this the assessment for the paper, which the link is still on the screen, we developed a number of methodological and operational parameters, and one of them was in terms of one of the operational parameters is how the degree to which national reporting is integrated, like climate change adaptation and development M&E is integrated. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that paper, and I'd also encourage you to go online and have a look at the Philippines case study, because they're showing quite well, that demonstrates quite well how SDG and development and climate change adaptation M&E can be linked. So that's I'd encourage you to read the paper. But we have looked at that, and there's evidence, there's sort of sporadic evidence of it taking place, but there's also a lot of evidence that it's not. But it is something that we advocate, that there does need to be development and climate change M&E which are conjoined. In the context, so there's another question that's come in. In the context of adaptation tracking the global stocktake under Paris Agreement, how can actors achieve comparability of progress indicators when they align with? Good question. So we've actually developed, or we're just about to publish a paper which is called Climate Adaptation Monitoring, Evaluation, Learning Systems, which the acronym is CAMELS. We're looking at that under that paper. It's integrating, so it's developing an an adaptation M&E system, or MEL system, which is going to be responsive to a range of climate futures. It's integrating science, and it's basically developing an M&E system which is aligned with the guidance for what adaptation is under Article 7 of the Paris Agreement. And it's almost like a diagnostic tool that allows you to be able to develop national MEL systems along those lines. In terms of comparability, that's as we sort of broached at the start. The adaptation is going to be hugely context specific. So in a previous presentation I've done, we talk about what are some of the methodological challenges in adaptation M&E, and the fact that adaptation is so highly context specific, it's going to be very difficult for comparability in any case. But KPI 4 gives us sort of broad. I'd encourage you to have a look at that, and I'd encourage you to have a look at the methodological guidance which has been developed under that, but in the UK, and I'll see if I can dig that out and send it through to you. So that gives you like an indicator which allows for contextualization within it. It can be quite wide, or it gives a lot of wriggle room for defining adaptation based on the context, but then that does allow for aggregation at a higher level, but again, it's quite detailed, it's quite resource intensive to actually undertake that. Have we looked at UNDP CATE tool and Kenya's integrated MRV tool for project level, national level adaptation? I've not, I'm afraid. But we looked at the Kenya's MRV Plus system in terms of the way it was designed and sort of the operational elements, but it was just to sort of, as I say, we had a number of methodological and operational parameters against which we were assessing them, but we've not looked at that, I'm afraid.
Great, thanks Barry for a rapid fire round of answers. If there aren't any more questions, we might wrap up a couple minutes early and give about 8 minutes of your life back to you. With that, I'd really like to thank all the panelists, as well as all of you for joining today from wherever you might be in the world. I'd also like to point out this is the last of the series for 2019. We'll be starting up again in the spring. Please do watch out for any more sort of notices about this. This webinar was recorded and will also be circulating the slides to all of the people who've signed up for this. And for more information, all of our webinars are available on wi.org/climate tracking and transparency webinars. Obviously, we'll send this link around in the email. And with that, I will thank you all for joining and wish you a happy end of the year. Webinar is now over. Thanks.